Okay, this video is a comparison of dementia prevention from the books of Dr. Greger, his recent book, How Not to Age. This is it, How Not to Age. I always take the covers off. And then here's the other book I just recently, I'm not quite done with it yet, but I think I got through the main part. The Alzheimer's Solution. This is by Dr. Sherzai, Dean and Aisha. I got some interesting points about it. So, first of all, we'll talk about who the different people are here. Greger is a very smart guy. He never did a residency. I don't think he does any type of medical clinical job. He never did a residency, is my understanding, what I had heard from some videos I saw about him. But he's very clever and smart. You read his book, it's all full of clever little funny things, and that's usually a sign of a very high verbal IQ. And he says things that are funny, like a person who completely avoids something. He says dietary celibacy. He's got lots of clever jokes, okay? Also, Greger knows a lot. He doesn't have to work clinically like the rest of us, so he's got lots of time to read, and he reads a lot. So he knows a lot, and he comes up sometimes with some interesting things, some funny things. He comes up with stuff from some distant paper he read. So I do find Greger interesting to read, okay? With that being said, though, I think he also, though, is sort of like, a closet corporate guy. He's always kind of doing, it seems to me, what corporate would want. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. All his books are bestsellers. They get tons and tons of reviews, millions of views. I can tell you, if you're saying something that corporations don't want, it's hard to get views on the internet. It's hard to get book reviews. Everything gets silently suppressed in the background. There's lots of ways to shadow, ban things in the background if they're not saying what corporations want them to say. And people who don't think that's true, they don't know what they're talking about. I can assure you it's true. So, anyways, what else? He does a lot of little things I think that the public doesn't really understand, but they all come out to sell more drugs, sell more supplements, in my impression of reading him. The Sherzais, with their book here, it was called The Alzheimer's Solution. The Sherzais basically sound to me like good doctors doing the best they can. They're not as smart as Greger, but they're doing the best they can. They both did residencies in neurology, and they did some sorts of fellowship. They work at Loma Linda, which is a great place for neuroscience, and it's nice to be in California. At least it used to be before they opened the down south border. You have to play it safe, though, when you're a clinical working doc in a for-profit clinic. That's a great place for the vegan diet, too. Loma Linda, California, where you got all the Seventh-day Adventists there. Their longest-lived documented people in the whole world ever. Well-documented population. And the Sherzais have a lot of experience working with these patients with cognitive impairment. So they can speak from a lot of experience. I'll give them credit for that. And I'll also tell you, I think they do a much better job than most neurologists, and they know a lot more than the average neurologist that you will talk to. I talk to neurologists all the time, so I have a pretty good idea of what they know. But where do I think they screw up? They recommend way too much fat. And I think when you get right down to it, he is pro-corporation, okay? So Greger is a pro-corporation guy. They're not necessarily pro-corporation, but they're, like most doctors, they're what I would call chicken shits. I mean, they're not talking about the controversial stuff. And then I'm kind of like the bad boy of veganism. Nobody wants anything to do with me. Nobody's asking me for an interview. I don't get any email interview requests, okay? Because I talk about things that they won't touch with a 10-foot pole. They want to stay away from all that kind of stuff. Okay, academically, I think I was better than any of these guys by far. But I think that, we'll look at the next slide. The next slide will be a little more interesting to you. So I just quickly made this chart here. I'll take myself off the picture here. Or maybe I'll just hide the background a little bit. Okay, so where does it get interesting? Greger recommends omega-3s, like the algae type. Of course, fish are bad. They also, Sherzai recommend the algae. I don't think there's any good reason to recommend omega-3 supplements. And I think there's problems with them. Purification. I worry, algae can make toxic chemicals. I don't want anything to do with them. You get enough, I think, from just eating regular plants. And Dr. McDougall agrees with that. I don't think our ancestors did it. The blue zones don't go running around looking for omega-3 supplements. I don't see any reason for that. Okay, I know that some people are going to tell you there's all these papers saying you need omega-3 supplements, or you're going to become demented, especially if your blood levels are low. But you have to remember, tons and tons of research in the modern world, it's all funded by industry. They own the journals, they own the scientists. So there's always going to be a bunch of, bogus recent studies saying that anything commercially profitable has, a bodyguard of lies all wrapped around it. Okay, what about olive oil? He's a little bit plus or minus on olive oil. He criticizes it, Gregor does. He criticizes a little bit, but then he comes back and says it's not so bad. He's a little positive on canola oil. When I say he's positive or not, what I mean is, the doctor who writes a book or a book chapter, they can show you whatever they want. They can show you studies showing something is good, or they can show you studies saying something is bad. So the fact that he's showing things that say olive oil is not bad and that canola oil is a little good, that's promoting the product, okay? Just so you know. It's not like you're doing an actual commercial for them, but, I would say all oils are bad. Like Esselstyn, like McDougall, you don't want to eat any of these processed oils. They're all liquid fat. And now Sherzai says that olive oil, extra virgin olive oil is good in small amounts. And then in one spot he says they're good in small amounts. Another spot he's kind of neutral with them on a different chart. But they're all bad. They're all liquid fat. And so it seems to me like he's a little bit weaker. He hasn't studied the nutrition as much, okay? Because I think that's a mistake to say that, in my opinion. Okay, coffee and tea. Yeah, Gregor's pretty strongly positive promoting caffeine for brain health. I think that's completely wrong. I know why he does it, but I think it's wrong. He does, quote one study, saying that it had some neuroprotective effect. Sherzai say caffeine's neuroprotective. I think that's ridiculous and I mentioned that on my last slide. Everybody says, oh, stress is bad. Psychological stress is bad. It elevates fibrinogen. It makes your blood more prone to clotting. It causes vasoconstriction in a lot of areas. More risk of clotting. Isn't that bad, bad, bad? Okay? It immunosuppresses you, making you more vulnerable to infections. Isn't that bad? Cortisol is elevated. You have more insomnia. You don't sleep as deeply. You get more glutamate transmission. It's an excitotoxin effect. You get vasoconstriction to the brain. You get increased blood lipids, increased blood glucose. All of these things are bad other than an acute stress phase. Well, coffee does the exact same thing. So why would coffee be good? That's bullshit. Okay, it's stupid. Okay, so... And again, I'm telling you, I've studied all the nutrition people I could study, and I'm telling you, McDougall's the best. And I'm also telling you, McDougall's the best on some things. He knows the literature for the 1900s the best. McDougall's very bright. He's first in his class. He knows how to take an issue and see the truth of it and flip it on its head and get right to the point, okay? And I can do the same thing. And I'll tell you, most people can't. It's just the truth, okay? That's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing this hobby. Whenever I read these books, I see my books are so much better, even though nobody reads my books, that it makes me feel good about myself. So I like doing it, okay? Because my family will ask me, why the hell do you read so much? What do you get out of it? How much money do you make from that? Why do you waste your time? All right, so anyways, what else? Gregor's really strongly positive on nuts, and Sherzai is also very positive on nuts. And, there's a lot of industry funding to make nuts good. I don't see how. Nuts are super fat, like 80 to 90% fat. There's nothing good about fat for blood flow, and all fat tends to make you gain weight. I don't care about some magic study saying, nut fat makes you lose weight. I think that's ridiculous. Okay, what else? They're both really positive about seeds. Seeds are also super high in fat, and flax seeds are real high in fat, and they're real high in estrogenic chemicals. I don't want to eat estrogenic fat, okay? You can, put a bikini on it, but I don't want to eat estrogenic fat. I mean, it sounds like nonsense to me. And they both also recommend chocolate, or cocoa and all this stuff. What I'm trying to say is, how are you going to keep your fat levels low if you're doing all this stuff here? You're taking omega-3s, you're eating some olive oil, maybe some canola oil, then you're having soy, which is a very hot, super high fat bean, and nuts, and chia seeds, and flax seeds, and cocoa or chocolate. I think that's all nonsense, okay? That's getting to be a relatively fat diet. I think that's a bad idea. Bad for blood flow, bad for weight gain. Weight gain leads to insulin resistance and it leads to hypertension. All of that sounds to me like a very bad idea. And then what I meant by saying is they chicken away from the unpopular subjects. Nobody wants to talk about F- in the water, and how that's a brain neurotoxin known to lower IQ based on numerous studies. And it has all kinds of mechanisms that show you it's neurotoxic. And why do you think it's attached to so many neuropsychopharmacology drugs? Because it increases crossing of the blood-brain barrier. Look at Prozac. What's the other name of it? Fluoxetine, okay? And you'll see there's other papers showing, F- and aluminum can facilitate the movement of toxic chemicals across the blood-brain barrier. All right, so what I'm trying to say is, Sherzai, they don't even put it in their book, F-. They don't put anything in their book about atrazine, about aluminum, about mercury, about SSRIs, okay, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They actually, I think somewhere, who did it? Oh, they did make a real meek mention of antidepressants and benzodiazepines potentially having a negative effect. There's a real gentle statement, and that real gentle statement about statins. Okay, statins, they're mitochondria inhibitors. Many antidepressants, SSRIs, and some of the other ones are mitochondria inhibitors. Anything that inhibits mitochondria is bad for the brain. If it affects the brain, mitochondria. The brain needs tons of energy and it needs it fast. Benzodiazepines are neurotoxic. At least they mention that real meekly and politely, like in a tiny little footnote. Okay. So let's see, what else? He doesn't even mention MSG in this book. He's weakly positive in the past on one of his lectures saying, oh, it's no big deal. No, MSG is a neurotoxin. It's a brain toxin. There's entire books written about that. There's several entire books written about that subject. Sherzai's don't even mention it. So that's what I mean by, like I said, I felt good about myself when I read their books. I go, gosh, I'm doing so much more than these other guys, okay? And there's no comparison, really. My books compared to theirs, they're like baby books, okay? They're avoiding the tough, hot issues that everyone doesn't want to talk about. I'm talking about it, and I'm telling you the truth. They stink. They don't even mention deletory theory. Deletory's theory and my theory are the two best theories about neurodegeneration, and they tell you exactly what to do. Deletory is the mouse equivalent theory, the vascular hypothesis of Alzheimer's, also, chronic cerebral hypoperfusion leading to underperfusion of the brain. It can be either due to blood pressure being too low, or it could be due to the atherosclerotic damage to the arteries caused by both hypertension and by diabetes. Microvasculopathy, thickening of the capillary basement membrane with diabetes, collagen fibrosis of the arterial walls with hypertension. Over time, this gets worse and worse and leads to decreased oxygen from the capillaries reaching the brain cells, causing them to be hypoxic. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, they don't tell you the most important thing. If you want to understand the brain and prevent dementia, the best thing you could know is you could know Deletory's theory, and you could know my theory. My theory is neurovascular uncoupling. So my theory is really building on, traditional ideas of excitotoxicity, the calcium hypothesis, and I put it all together in terms of also understanding how EMF works in there, the voltage-gated calcium channels being opened up by EMF, and the no-oh-no pathway of nitric oxide, peroxynitrite. All of these things, and SERCA inhibitors as well, all of these things work to the same effect of causing a cytotoxicity. Inability to control levels of cytoplasm calcium, leading to overactivation of the neuron such that its metabolic rate is way up here and it outstrips its oxygen and glucose delivery. You see, if you have something that decreases oxygen and glucose delivery, like a high sodium diet, etc., that's going to widen this gap. When that gap gets too wide, neurovascular uncoupling gets too wide, the neurons die. They go into apoptosis. As a matter of fact, in Greger's book, he quotes a study recommending that systolic blood pressure be kept below 120, which I personally think sounds a little crazy. Oh, sure, you can tell me in some study, probably funded by a drug company. No, I did not read the study, but, you want to push these old people blood pressure. Why do you think a person has a high blood pressure? So they can get blood to the top of their brain. So some old guy who's running, at 170 over 100, you suddenly drop him below 120. I would worry he's going to get enough blood to his brain. And he might fall from that. He might stroke from that. I see tons. I see some patients with hundreds of little silent strokes in their brain. We call them silent strokes. We don't know necessarily how symptomatic they are. Periventricular flare hyperintensities. I see that all day, every day. Okay, so anyways, that was kind of my point about this. So Greger, really smart, and you can learn a lot of interesting things from him, but he sort of seems to me pro-corporate. I don't know anything about him, if he is or not officially, but I can tell you he never sort of comes out and says these drugs are all bad, and he sort of leaves the door open all the time to sell more drugs and supplement, is the impression I get from reading his stuff. Sherzai's, what I get from reading them is basically they're trying to do a good job. It seems to me like their heart's in the right place. It doesn't seem to me, though, they've got the intellectual horsepower to contradict things that get said to them too much. Because most people, if you just tell them the same thing 100 times, they go, okay, I believe you, versus, you know, somebody a little smarter will say, that's horseshit. I don't believe it. You could tell me 1,000 times. I don't believe it, okay? Because, you know, promoting all this fat, that don't make sense if you want good blood flow, okay? And we talked about it before. You get good fats from plants. You get omega-3s from just eating routine plants. And you get fat from your fiber. You don't need to be seeking out fat. All these populations that eat, you know, the 1% or less fat foods like potatoes, sweet potatoes, and rice, they're doing pretty well. They're really healthy populations in general. But so, anyways, there it is. I hope that was helpful.